Hi everyone and welcome to my latest video. I'm going to be doing this one based on the Greens policy documents and obviously what policies they do have, and obviously explaining what they are and how they would affect if they were to come into power and what detrimental effect they would have on this country. Because obviously, yes, we know the Greens are not the solution for this country, because obviously you do have some deluded people within this country that believe they are the solution when obviously they physically are not the solution to this country, because obviously they are becoming more of the Islamic Green Party. But if you look at what's gone on since they did that against the right side of politics in London the other week, it's put a bit more of a divide in there. So obviously, yes, that's a bit more of a good thing for everyone. But without further ado, what I'm going to do is start going through. So obviously, as you can see, obviously, the first bit is providing a fairer, greener homes for all. Obviously, yes, we do need more homes building, but as it says, everyone needs a warm, secure, affordable home, yet millions of people don't have the most basic building block for a happy, successful life. Over 1 million households are on council waiting lists, and more than 130,000 children are growing up in temporary accommodation. Our right homes, right place, right charter, a right place charter. Local authorities and national government to deliver homes people can afford, rent or buy, where people need them. Our right homes, right place, right price charter will simultaneously protect valuable green space for communities, reduce climate emissions, tackle fuel poverty, and provide general affordable housing. So this is how they want to go about it. So it would require local authorities to spread small developments across their areas, and it would require all new developments to be accompanied by extra investment needed in the local health, transport and other services. It would also ensure all the new homes meet passive and equivalent standards, and house builders solar panels and heat pumps on all new homes. But obviously this is where I disagree with it, because you can't just shove solar panels onto all houses, because the cost to replace these solar panels and the heat pumps, that's where it suddenly adds that expense onto the local authorities and the solar panels, unless we suddenly get them built within the United Kingdom, which at the moment that does not look very likely, because they don't look at the other side of the coin here, because they get shipped in from China, which is where they are made. So again, it doesn't kind of make very much sense, because you're using quite a huge carbon footprint to get them here, and they break down quite easily, and you still got the thing of building the batteries to save the electricity from them, which again they don't do. And then obviously it goes on for the our energy bills are far too high. Yes, I agree with that, but how they're going about it is not the right way, because obviously we have the worst insulated homes in Europe. Again, I don't tend to agree with that, because a lot of homes these days are insulated quite well. We would bring down bills by reducing the loss of heat from homes, because the cheapest bill is the one you don't have to pay. But again, we can bring down the price of gas anyway, and that's just by fracking in this country, because obviously we can drill for gas, and once we get our own gas supply in this country, we don't have to import the gas. We can just use our own, because it brings the cost down anyway. They don't seem to understand that. Now, she says elected Greens will push for local authority-led street-by-street retrofit programme to insulate our homes, which most authorities are doing anyway, to adapt our building to more extreme climate conditions. But then I don't understand what they mean by extreme conditions, because obviously we don't exactly get the worst winters in the world where it's like snow for a solid 6 months. So obviously they're then saying £29 billion over the next 5 years to insulate homes to an EPC-B standard or above, and then £4 billion over the next 5 years to insulate over buildings to a high standard, and £9 billion over the next 5 years for low carbon heating systems. But again, it's just a wasted bit of money, because obviously you can choose to whether you want the heat pump or not, because I think standard boilers are just as good. It seems to be wasting money where it's not needed. And obviously 150,000 new social homes each year, which to provide 150,000 new social homes each year, a new build and to purchase refurbishment of older social stock, a community right to buy for local authorities for several categories of property, ending the individual right to buy. This is what I disagree with, because obviously the right to buy, I think, should still be there, because obviously it's an option for people who've been living in their property for quite some years, and they have that chance to get onto the property ladder. It's that cheaper way to get onto it. And obviously the fairer deal for renters. So millions of private renters face unaffordable rents and consistent insecurity. Green MPs will push for rent control, so local authorities can control rents if the rent market is unaffordable for many local people. A new stable rent tenancy in end no-fault evictions, so tenants are secure in their homes and don't therefore have their lives turned upside down at the whim of the landlords. We will introduce tenants' right to demand energy efficient improvements. I agree with the energy efficient side of it, but you can't then stipulate that the landlord can't sell their property. The landlord has the right to do what they want with the property. That's the problem. And then you've also got private residential tenancy boards to provide an informal, cheap and speedy formal for resolving disputes before they reach tribunal. Again, it's not down to the local government to get involved in that side of things. But building a fairer, healthier country. Obviously, the NHS faces the worst crisis in 80-year history. Yes, we do agree with that, but this is where the Green side of things do not understand what is going on. Because this is a result of the deliberate conservative underfunding. It's not a funding thing that's causing the NHS to fail. So this is where they're getting it completely wrong. So the NHS is undermined at the risk of collapse, paving the way for further privatisation. Again, it's not the privatisation that's causing the issues. The Green Party is committed to fully public, properly funded health and social care system and keeping the profit motive well away from the NHS. So the Green Party will push for a year-on-year reduction in waiting lists. Again, who doesn't want that? But guaranteed access to an NHS dentist, that's never going to be achievable, because again, more dentists are going private by the day. Guaranteed rapid access to GP and same day access in case of urgent need. An immediate boost to pay off NHS staff, including restoration of junior doctors' pay and help staff retention. To meet the aims, we estimate the NHS in England will require an additional annual expenditure of £8 billion in the first full year of the next Parliament, rising to £28 billion in total by 2030. Additional capital spending, at least £20 billion, is needed over the next 5 years for hospital building repair. Yeah, obviously for the building repair that's fine, but obviously the other £28 billion they're on about, it doesn't matter how much you throw at it. It's because it's the internal issues where the problems lie. For example, you need to get rid of the DEI within the hospitals. You need to get rid of the upper management. Once you get rid of all that, the NHS will survive on its own and be able to rectify its own issues, because when you keep throwing the money at it, it's just causing its own issues to fall over. But then that's where the Green Party doesn't see that, because they love a good bit of DEI. But obviously it goes on saying investing in GPs and public health is key to prevention, early diagnosis and improving our public life, while also reducing the burden on the NHS. Green MPs will push for increasing the allocation of funding to primary medical care, with additional annual spending reaching 1.5 billion by 2030. Again, it doesn't matter, that funding will never reach them with the amount of DEI within there. And restoring the public health budgets of 2015 and 16 levels, with the immediate annual increasing 1.5 billion, smoking cessation, drug and alcohol treatment and sexual health services all need to be properly funded. Yes, I understand they do need better funding and they need to be sourced correctly, but the only issue is it's not going to be dealt with if you're relying on the LGBTQ community and the DEI within there to sort that out. You need to get that out of the, because you're obviously going, oh, but we need this doctor who's for example, a black gay doctor. Why do you need one of them? Just for example, you go for the best skilled. That's how it should be in every line of job. A national commission to acquire an evidence-based approach to reform the UK's counterproductive rug laws. Again, because we know how they want to go down that, they want to make all rugs legal. So no, we don't want that, because that's just going to cause the NHS to fall over itself, because you'll have more people with rugs problems. They'll be going in on a daily basis, addicted to the stuff. It just wouldn't work. You've got the NHS dentistry, which they go into next, which is the Greens MPs will end the systematic underfunding of dentistry and the scandal of dental treatment deserts by pushing for a new NHS dentists, which you're never going to be able to change it back to the NHS dentist, because with 90% of them being private, you're never going to be able to get them all back under the NHS, so it's not going to be able to work that way. So additional investment in the NHS dentistry reaching 3 billion by 2030, which is completely unachievable. But funding the community hubs and primary care to roll out free dental nursing for children and those on low incomes, which is already there anyway. So mental health and neurodiversity. So there has been a dramatic rise in health problems in recent years, particularly among young people. But this is where I tend to see this as a different issue, because obviously a lot of it's quite false and negative. Because obviously when you see it since COVID, for example, it's a lot of it, people just claim it and it's not real. They just use it as an issue. And you can say, oh, well, I've got all these mental issues, and you've not really got them. You can just put it all on, and it's what needs to be put to one side and get people back into work. So elected Greens will press for a legal framework that supports the rights for those struggling with their mental health to be respected and to live fulfilling lives. But the problem is, by the sounds of that, they're just going to allow people to live with mental health forever, and it just never be dealt with. So increased funding for mental health care, putting it on an equal footing with physical health care, enabling people to access evidence-based mental health therapies within 28 days, a trained paid counsellor in every school and sixth form. So it sounds like they're wanting people to basically go from school straight onto mental health. Fantastic. Which is, again, not what we want. You've got readily available tailored provision to meet needs communities of colour, children, adolescents, older people, and the LGBTQI communities. Again, it's just pushing this mental health in every avenue they can. And then we go on to the assisting unaliving. So elected Greens will support change in the law to legalise assisted unaliving for people suffering from terminal disease who wish to avoid prolonged unnecessary suffering. If this is clear and settled, will proper safeguards be put in place? Again, I don't agree with this, because obviously you shouldn't be able to have your life taken away and stuff like that, because obviously it should be your life goes when it goes. Assisted means I still think that'd be a crime, and obviously they'd be committing a crime in changing the laws in that way. The British laws never state that way. I think that's why they want to get rid of the C of E Church and stuff like that. So you can see why certain bits of their policies are the way they are. And obviously the end new cases of HIV by 2030. It's a bit hypocritical with the Zach Polanski, with him being gay. Obviously it does spread, but you know. Green MPs will work towards no more HIV transmissions by 2030. I don't think that's physically possible, because obviously it's something that will always have a spread, and especially when you've got illegal immigration coming from certain countries, it's always going to get into the country. How are you going to stop that unless you close our borders? They just don't seem to understand that. It's a bit counterproductive, is probably the best way to put that one. You got caring with fairness, compassion and dignity next, which is over 400,000 people are awaiting care reviews, payments, assessments, and there are over 150,000 staff vacancies in the care sector. Yeah, I understand there are those vacancies, but then you're not taking on the British people. This is where their issues are, because they're preferring to take up believing it's the dingy dwellers that are the important people to take on, people from abroad. So why should we take on the people from abroad when we've got 5.1 million unemployed people in this country? So to address this crisis, they'd like to take the pressure off the NHS. Green MPs will push for an investment of 20 billion. Notice it's quite high amounts in everything they're asking for. This is why the country would fall over. So introduce free personal care along the lines of successfully brought in by the Scottish Government to ensure dignity in old age for the disabled, increase pay rates and introduce carer structure for carers to rebuild their care workforce. For those still living at home, this will enable earlier access to help maintain independence and well-being for those living in residential settings. The personal care elements will be fully funded alongside tapered approach to other costs based on the level income for those struggling to afford accommodation, element for residential care, including because of their spouse is still in the family home. Local authorities need to be properly funded, but again, this is where this falls apart, because no local authority is properly funded, and you'd always have that issue. And again, it goes on to, for the elected Greens, will push for another 3 billion. Again, where's this magic money tree? To enable local authorities to provide high quality children's social care, which is not possible, because you've got to find this magic money tree, which Labour seem to have. They must be wanting to have access to. We know it's not possible unless you've got a massive income of money coming into the UK, which at the moment the UK doesn't have. We've got to find a better way of getting money in. Yes, under reform we know what to do to get money in. If we drill for oil and gas, because you can sell the oil and gas on, it makes you a massive amount of profit, because you only have to look across the ocean to the US. It has worked exceptionally well. But getting back to this, you've got creating a fairer, greener economy, which we know they seem to have gone away from this greener economy as of recent, because it's all about Gaza. But Green MPs will fight for an economy that delivers security, well-being, and a better quality for life for everyone, as well as protecting our environment and enabling us to tackle the climate crisis with the ambition and speed it demands. Privatisation has failed, and dividends are paid to the shareholders while infrastructure is run into the ground. The Green Party is committed to the public ownership of public services. Well, we'd love all that to happen, but we know it's not physically possible in every single way, shape, and form. So we'll go through it in each point. So obviously, the elected Greens would push for the following bits and transformation. So and another 40 billion, another high figure for you. Investment per year to shift the green economy over the course of the next parliament. But the problem is, into the green economy, it's not going to work, because we've seen we're already at 7 trillion a year, and then it's projected to go up to 10 to 12 to 14 to 16 trillion. It's not affordable. The carbon tax to drive fossil fuels out of the economy and raise money to invest in green transition, again, it's not feasible, because look, electric cars, they're not the next generation of car to drive, because the second-hand market in it, second-hand cars for electric are expensive, and to replace a battery for that is £5,000 to £6,000 per battery, and some of them have up to 12 batteries. So if 3 of them go wrong, that's £18,000. Not a great thing. Whereas a petrol car, the parts in it are relatively cheap to replace. Say your battery in a normal car, you can pick up for about 50-60 quid. So the economy for a normal car is better. Yes, if we can bring the fuel down, we can get it down to as little as 70p a litre if we get the oil in this country done, and then we can get our own substances. So actually bringing the railways, water companies, and the big 5 retail energy companies in public ownership, yes, that is possible, but we'd probably better creating one British energy company. It'd probably be the easy way down that one, which is then we'd be able to produce our own gas, our own oil, our own everything else then, which makes everything easier, our own electricity, and then obviously eventually nuclear power is how you best going down that route. So obviously they would also build sustainability of our own communities through the transition, and obviously the MPs would push for 12.4 billion investment in skills training, equipping workers to play a full role in a green economy, which we know green economies don't work. A share of a community ownership in a local sustainable energy infrastructure, such as wind farms. And we know wind farms don't work because you have to import them all the way from China. They're not made in this country. And also the fact you have to turn them off when it's windy. So it's kind of counterproductive. They don't store energy. That's a problem because they've no battery packs for them. So it's kind of counterproductive. Whereas if a nuclear facility, that goes 24/7 and there's no issue. It's better to have that. And then obviously it goes on to taxing wealth fairly. So while the public services are crying out for investment, the number of billionaires in the UK has risen from 29 to 171 since 2010, but then it doesn't tell you how many of them have actually gone and left the UK, which is a substantial amount, because obviously under this Labour government they've been pushing them out, because obviously under the Greens they'd all leave, because obviously they're not going to stand by and just stay here, because obviously why would you? And same with all the millionaires, they pick up and leave overnight, and it then loses a lot of jobs. And that's the other side of it. They don't see the other side of the coin. And then you'd have to tax every normal Tom, Dick and Harry, and that's the unfair side of it. And then it goes on to their wealth tax of 1% annually on assets above 10 million and 2% on assets above 1 billion. Only a tiny minority of people will pay this tax. But then why should they? This is the problem. Why should they be paying this when they've earned to get to that amount? What you should be doing is encouraging people to get to this status and get the economy booming again. Because when the economy's good, more people are paying for stuff and more people are buying stuff, and that's how you get stuff doing, because socialism doesn't work. Obviously, reform of capital gains tax to align rates paid by taxpayers on income and taxable gains. This would affect less than 2% of all income taxpayers. Again, it wouldn't, because again, they're just trying to cripple the system. Aligning the tax rates on investment income with tax and national insurance contribution rates on employer income. Removing the upper earnings limit that restricts the amount on national insurance paid high earners. We estimate that the end of the next parliament, these changes could raise additional revenue between 50 and 70 billion a year, and 2020 in the 2024 prices, a carbon tax set initially at £120 per tonne. But again, it wouldn't, because obviously when all the billionaires leave, it wouldn't. It's a false economy. So we are prepared to borrow to invest. So again, just like Labour, can the country just fall over? So borrowing doesn't work because it's a complete false economy. So allowing ourselves to be trapped in self-imposed physical straitjacket, which is what they are. They're putting themselves in a straitjacket again. Investing in protecting our climate now, they're not, because obviously it's all buying from China. You need to have manufacturing within this country. We'll save vast costs in the future. Well, not really. But SME community sector support. Small and medium-sized business are the lifeblood of the economy, but then obviously you're forcing them out, because obviously when these companies reach millionaire, billionaire status, they pick up and go, because obviously you don't want them here. That's the green way. Regional mutual banks to be set up to drive investment, decarbonisation and local economy sustainability. But then obviously, if we look at decarbonisation, around here we've got carbon capture, which is coming in, we're planning on doing it. Both when we get the reform government, it will be shut down completely, because obviously carbon capture is a dangerous thing to be building, because obviously it's worse than fracking. It's one of the worst things you could do, because when it leaks, the people it affects first is little children, because obviously it's their height it goes to, because it settles at their height. And obviously it erodes the pipes, because obviously you can never get pure carbon going down the pipes. And obviously it turns into things like sulfuric acid. And where they're trying to put it, it's not going to be the easiest of processes. It's going to go down there. There are other things it can create. It's going to cause tremors. It's going to affect the wildlife. It's going to affect all sorts of things, crops and things like that. But why should we be willing to risk all this just for carbon capture? It's going to be the biggest disaster we've ever done. But then again, the Greens and Mad Ed are just willing to push this for no reason. Again, there'll be $2 billion a year grant for funding local authorities to help businesses decarbonise. Again, it's just more money to spaff up the wall. Community ownership to be encouraged through the greater access to government funding in transition to zero carbon economy. Again, this is why we need reform, to get rid of this crazy net zero. Powering up a fairer, greener energy. Again, this is where this will be absolutely nuts. But accelerating clean energy investment and delivery. The UK's current climate targets do not reflect the urgency of the climate crisis. This is where they want everything sped up rapidly, which cannot happen because financially it's just not possible. Because we would push the government transition to a zero carbon society as soon as possible, and more than a decade ahead of 2050. So they want 2040, which is currently 2050. It's not possible. It needs to be more like 2100, if not later than that, because obviously it's not possible ever, to be perfectly honest. But the ambition will deliver a zero carbon electricity supply and security supply over short, long periods and low generation, with sufficient electricity for all cars, which all cars will never be all electric. The more likely go hydrogen, to be fair. Vans to be electric, for homes and buildings to stop using fossil fuels. I can't see that in our lifetime, to be fair. And for the most industry to transition to clean energy, which we're more likely to go nuclear than we are to go any other way. But eventually we're going to have to rely on petrol, diesel for a lot longer, probably the next 50 years, because obviously there's not enough batteries to go around for these electric cars, so you've got to think of other ways around. So obviously the elected ones would want to go with wind to provide around 70% of the UK's electric, which ain't going to happen by 2030, physically impossible. Delivery of 80 GW of offshore wind. Again, they don't take into consideration the unaliving of wildlife caused by the turbines, because obviously the ones that get caught in the turbines and the dolphins and stuff, they get beached, so they're not bothered by that, are they? 53 GW of onshore wind and 100 GW of solar by 2035. These are all unreachable. Investment in energy storage capacity and more efficient electricity distribution. You'd have to rip up the whole grid to do that. That's what they're not telling you. Communities to own their own energy sources, ensuring they can use any profit from selling excess energy to reduce their bills or benefit their communities. Again, that would be beautiful. But again, the size battery packs you'd have to install in your house, it'd take up your entire loft space. Phasing out fossil fuels, it's again, this bit is where it's not going to be in our lifetime. So cancel the recent fossil fuel license such as for Rosebank and stop all new fossil fuel extraction projects in the UK. I think that's just pure nuts, because obviously the amount of profit you can make from it, we can make trillions from what we've got in this country, because as I say, there's gas gold under this country, liquid gold in the North Sea. Why not make money from it while the sun shines? Introduce a carbon tax on fossil fuels, fuel imports, to just bankrupt us as a country. Fantastic, that's what they want us to do. And domestic extraction, yeah, it's just fantastic. On greenhouse gas emissions produced when fuel is burned. It just shows they don't want this country to prosper. Obviously, then it goes on to nuclear power. We want to see a phase out of nuclear energy when that's the best use of energy, because a nuclear power plant runs 24/7 and is the safest form of energy, which is unsafe, which it isn't. Much more expensive. Not really these days. It's pretty cheap to create the new small ones. The development of nuclear power stations is too slow. If you look at the smaller ones, no, they're quite quick. Given the pace of action we need on climate, they also create unmanageable quantities of radioactive waste. It's actually not that big anymore. They're quite small and are inextricable linked to the production of nuclear weapons. I understand that side of it, but the power plants are not linked to the weaponry. That's a separate place. So they're getting it completely wrong. But making work fair, obviously, yes, we do need to make work fair, but then obviously let's see how they want to make work fair, whether it's the right way or wrong way. So millions of people have seen pay seriously eroded by inflation for well over a decade. Yeah, we can understand under the Tories it didn't go right. So, including many who work in vital public services, Green MPs would defend and extend workers' rights to organise in the workplace, pushing for the repeal of current anti-union legislations and its replacement with positive charter of workers' rights, with the right to strike at its heart, along with the legal obligation for employers to recognise trade unions. This is where I do disagree with trade unions. I think we need to get rid of them, to be fair. Maximum 10-to-1 pay ratio for all private and public sector organisations. An increase of minimum wage to £15 an hour, no matter your age. I think obviously you can't just have the same pay for every age. You've got to have the staggered one, because obviously if you're 16, it's got to be probably different to 21, because obviously you're going to be doing different hours and obviously you won't be able to work nights and stuff like that. So obviously, yes, there's going to be that. And obviously, reducing the national insurance contributions, yes, for a certain age range and stuff like that. Yeah, that's fair. Equal employment rights for all workers from their first day of employment, including those working in the gig economy and 0-hour contracts. Gig employment employers that repeatedly break employment, data protection or tax law will be denied license to operate and move to a 4-day working week. A 4-day working week would not work, because you can't force every company in the country to work a 4-day working week, because most operate on a 5, and that is how the country has operated for nearly 2,000 years, and you can't suddenly change that. And it's not fair to suddenly force the country into that. It's the way it works. So then they go into a fairer, greener social support. This is how they want social support to work. So most of us want to live in a country where everyone is treated with dignity, not one where record numbers of children are in poverty. Well, no one wants children in poverty, but all older people can't keep warm, and disabled people are badly let down. We know that, but we can do much better. The country is supposed to be doing better, we know that one. But lifting everyone up and making sure all of us can access extra help when we need it to tackle cost of living crisis, the poorest of society, and make social security system fair and less punitive. Elected Greens will campaign on increase universal credit and legacy benefits by £40 a week, abolish the 2-child cap, lifting 250,000 children out of poverty, which has already been done by Labour anyway, end the bedroom tax. In the long term, introduce universal basic income to give everybody the security to start a business, study, train, and live their life in dignity. But we know why they want the universal basic income is because they want to be able to give that to all the illegals that come here, because they want them to just have it, and when they give them a house, they've got everything else and it's all sorted. But actually, disabled people will have as much right to lead a full, meaningful life, and their MPs will push for to restore the value of disabled benefits with an immediate uplift of 5%. That's quite an uplift, to be fair. So, but I don't know where they're getting all this funding from. Reform the intrusive eligibility tests like PIP and an unfair targeting of carers and disabled people on benefits. Well, it does need to be better eligibility tests on PIP. So, for example, you can't just use what people tell you on YouTube to do it. So, make the mandatory for councils to provide free transport for 16 to 18-year-old pupils with special educational needs. Yes, that is quite useful, but councils have got to have proper funding for it, and which they ain't going to just be able to get overnight. And there's no magic money tree, as I've said before, for it all. And obviously then you go into bringing nature back to life. Again, this is something that's, if we keep building on greenbelt land, it's not going to help. We are part of the nature and unleashes it flourish. We cannot flourish either, but the UK is one of the most nature depleted countries. No, it's not. Because you look at how much of Wales is green, how much of Scotland is green. There are huge bits of England that is green. And obviously we have got a lot of green land in this country. To protect and restore nature, elected Greens will campaign to introduce new Rights of Nature Act, giving rights to nature itself. And the scandal of sewage pouring into rivers, yes, that's fine, because obviously we shouldn't be allowing that to happen, because we know Esser up here, there was the thing where they were dumping stuff into the Manchester shipping canal. Extend people's access to green space and waterways close to where they live with the English Right to Roam Act. Set aside 30% of our land and seas by 2030, in which nature will receive the highest priority and protection. Green MPs will also press for an immediate end to the emergency authorisation of bee-killing pesticides, a new Clean Air Human Rights Act giving everyone the right to breathe clean air, which is just a standard really, because obviously we should all be breathing clean air anyway. But then it goes on to protecting animals. So this is a shorter one. So to better protect animals and their habitats. So there'll be a creation of a new commission on animal protection. But half of these, remember, these will never be even thought of because they only think of Gaza at the end of the day. A ban on all blood sports, including trial hunting, which, again, you shouldn't be banning all these because, again, this is a natural thing we've been doing for thousands of years. All UK domestic and overseas territorial waters to offer the highest level of protection to marine life. Again, that's why we need to get our waters back and why we need to be fully out of the EU. An end to badger culling, but again, you need to do badger culling at times because it keeps TB under control. An end to factory farming, enforcement of maximum stocking den sites, and a no routine use of antibiotics in farm animals. But then they have to use the antibiotics to keep the animals healthy, and you've got to think farming has to be allowed to do what it needs to be able to do. And a complete ban on close confinement in cages and deliberate unnecessary mutilation of farm animals. That's just a standard. So you've got fairer, greener food and farming is next. So our food system is failing us all. Poor diet and an estimated cost on NHS of 6.5 billion. But again, it's a choice of what you eat. That's where it all is. It's our personal choice. You can't put that on the NHS because obviously it's what we put in our mouth and not anyone else. But yet successful governments have failed to take on healthy food lobby. Meanwhile, the way we produce our food is damaging our natural world and our climate. Our food system accounts for the third of all greenhouse gases emissions and the greatest driver of natural loss and pollution in our rivers. Green MPs will work with farmers and other stakeholders to transform our food and farming system so we are producing healthy, nutritious food at a fairer price for consumers. Okay, so this is what they're going to push for under this. So financial support for farmers to be almost tripled and support the transition to nature-friendly farming. Again, that's just going to cost a lot more. Biodiversity and soil health to be conserved and improved, leading to cleaner rivers. That's fine. Farm payments to be linked to reduced use of pesticides and other agrochemicals. Again, only if it saves the farmers money. All children to have free school meal each day and free breakfast clubs for children to year 6. That's fair enough. Schools to involve children in growing, preparing and cooking food as part of their core curriculum, as long as it doesn't include veganism, because obviously that's why I'd be very wary with the Greens, because obviously it's got to be that it's a meat-based diet, because obviously I don't trust them when it comes to that. Obviously, policies to ensure good quality surplus food is not wasted. That's pretty much a standard. And then we go to transport, and obviously it's going on. They want carbon emissions, so it's vital to make easier opt-out green up choices. Yet public transport provision continues to decline, often leaving those on low income no affordable options. But then obviously this is what they want to push for: increase on annual public subsidies for rail, bus travel, and to 10 billion by the end of the next parliament. So again, it's more of this magic money tree with free bus travel for under 18s, which it kind of used to be when I was growing up, to be fair. Invest in additional 19 billion, so another 19 billion over 5 years to improve public transport. Yeah, public transport does need improving. Bring the railways back into public ownership. The problem is, if you do that, it'll worsen the service, because obviously, like you look up here, we've got Merseyrail. I think that would get worse under public ownership. Give local authorities control over funding for improved bus services. Bus services, I think you better have in them private, because obviously they can be kept better that way. Safe streets and active travel. So walking, wheeling and cycling don't just help reduce carbon emissions and air pollution, they can make us all happy and healthier too. But again, it's got to be a choice to do it. And obviously they will push for investing 2.5 million in new cycleways and footpaths. But again, this is where it's going to affect everyone, because the amount here they're spending 2 million on a cycle path that no one's going to use. They've done it in a few towns in Chester and no one's used it. It's a joke. So why? It should be consulted on and see how many people are going to use them, and then if it's not going to be used, don't do it. Reimagining how we use the streets and residential areas to reduce traffic and open them up for community use. Adopting Active Travel England objective to 50% of trips in England towns and cities to be walked, wheeled and cycled by 2030. Okay, and then aviation. This is one they want to go at, which is it's unfair to attack the aviation industry because it's had enough problems over the years. So, aviation, the fastest growing source of CO2 emissions, but then obviously they're not bothered when they're going to G20 and things like that, when they're flying the private jets and things like that, when you see them flying back and forth. That's fine. I'm sorry, well, maybe cancel G20 and do it all on Zoom. That's my attitude. But they will push for a frequent flyer levy. No, that's not fair. Ban on domestic flights for journeys that would take less than 3 hours by train. No, because it's quicker to go by air, and obviously people should be able to go by whatever transport they want. Halt the too expensive new airport capacity. No, because obviously it's helping, and anything that helps the economy grow, I'm happy to have. Education should be about inspiring a love of learning and ensuring every young person can reach their potential. Well, yeah, that's fair enough. So, but this is what Green MPs want. To increase school funding by 8 billion, to include 2 billion to pay uplift for teachers. I think teachers are on enough bloody money, to be fair. Supporting every higher education student with the restoration grants and end of tuition fees, ending high stakes testing at primary and secondary schools, and abolishing Ofsted. If you get rid of Ofsted, schools will just be able to get away with whatever they want and be teaching whatever they want. No, because we need to be able to hold schools accountable. Art, sports and culture for all. So this is what they want under that. So 5 billion investment, so more money to spaff up the wall again. Community sports, arts and culture, keeping local sports facilities, museums, theatres, library, galleries open and thriving. Well, but they've got to be funded in a better way, I suppose. An end to VAT on cultural activities, lowering the prices of everything from museum and to gigs. But then how are you going to do that? You can't just force them to lower the tickets. Our media landscape is skewed and dominance of billionaire and big tech ownership, intent of maximising profits by irresponsible practice that undermine democracy and promote harmful online content. I disagree with that, to be fair. But elected Greens will push for a change in the law that no single individual company can own more than 20% of any media market. Again, that's just taking it too far. They can't change things like that. All reforms proposed in the second part of the 2012 Leveson report, again, I don't think they'll be able to do that. But defending human rights, democracy and justice, so obviously they will defend democracy and the human rights, uphold the rule of law and tackle political corruption, which they are corrupt anyway, the Greens, so that's why you don't see it, because they've got anti-Semitism within them. They don't see that. Obviously they will defend the Human Rights Act and a membership of the European Convention of Human Rights, which is something we do need to come out of, because obviously at the moment we're kind of half in the EU, half out. We never fully came out, which is what the Greens don't see, because obviously we can create our own version of the Human Rights Act, because we created it in the first place. We just need to come out of Strasbourg, which, why do we have to answer to Strasbourg in the first place? Because we're supposed to be sovereign. But they will push for replacing the first past the post system, which, yes, I agree with that part, for parliamentary elections with a fair and proportional voting system. Replacing the House of Lords, yes, that bit is good, because obviously at the moment they know they've got no members, we've got no members, so it would benefit both parties. Votes for 16-year-olds, that I disagree with, because the reason they want that is because they think they can take control of 16-year-olds by him warping 16-year-olds. Green MPs will always stand up against hate crime. Well, they're not, because they seem to love that, because they've got a lot of racism within the party. Misogyny and violence against women, no, they don't. This is where it's backwards, because obviously, especially like some Mohsin Ali, he seems to stand up for what is going on in Iran, and he loved the fact of the women being unalived and put into jail and stuff like that, for claiming they were raped. It's double standards within the Green, because obviously, and then it goes on to Islamophobia and anti-Semitism. That's very rich, that's saying that, because obviously when they are rife with anti-Semitism left, right and centre within the party, there's thousands of members that are that way. They're never going to get rid of it, and obviously I just can't see how they get rid of it within the party. Obviously, yes, the Islamophobia is, I think, it's more of a made-up word, because you're basically saying you're scared of Islam, and obviously, I just think it's false. But hey ho. But going on with our commitment to human rights, encompasses equalities, justice, and civil liberties too. So we will campaign to end violence against women and girls. No, they're not going to be doing that, because obviously the more that you take on the Islam side, that's the problem. Scrap the police. You can't scrap the police. That's just going to make things worse. Crime Sentencing and Courts Act, the Public Order Act. Oh, this is just going to make the country just fall apart. And the legislation that erodes the right to protest. Oh, so you're going to do it so you can have as many protests against every Tom, Dick and Harry. You're just going to cause massive uproar in this country. Campaign for the right to self-identification for trans and non-binary people. No, because non-binary is not a real thing. Scrap the Prevent program. I agree with that. Misogyny, Islamophobia needs getting rid of. Anti-Semitism is rife, yes, especially within their party. Seek to restore trust and confidence in the police. Well, how can you do that if you're scrapping the police? It's kind of double standards there. Repair and renew our crumbling court system with a £2.5 billion investment. Yeah, the courts do need sorting because they are a bit corrupt. But the Greens believe in a national self-determination. Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland should be free to make their own decisions about the relationship with the rest of the United Kingdom. I think we need to all be one, to be fair. Then she goes on to a fairer, greener world. So in a world where war, climate breakdown and the rise of authoritarian regimes, yeah, there are them, but then again, you're never going to stop them. The Green Party believes that the UK foreign policy should be based on a shared commitment to democracy, peace, global solidarity and protection of human rights. Yeah, but you'd have your own human rights, just like America has its own human rights, Australia has its own human rights. It's how it all goes. So their MPs would work for take the lead in upholding the right to self-determination and enforcement of international law, continue to support Ukraine as it resists Russian invasion. But we can't just keep funding them forever and a day because that's just going to, again, bankrupt this country. Rejoin the EU as soon as the political conditions are right. Yeah, and then just going to be funding their coffers for every day, forever and a day, because it's going to cost us billions, if not trillions. And obviously that's not fundamentally great. Israel and Palestine, that's where they're going next. So we condemn the appalling unalivement of hundreds of Israeli civilians by Hamas, and since then have watched in horror as Israeli forces have committed war crimes that have caused the deaths of tens of thousands of Palestinian civilians. This is where I disagree with it, because obviously this is where they keep going on, but it's all the Gaza bit, and obviously I can't be dealing with all this bit, because obviously this is all their major thing, because obviously where they go, yes, it's Gaza, 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 and obviously it's all the crap, because an immediate bilateral ceasefire, yeah, but then you've got to call Palestinian for what they are, a T group, and an end to arms of sales to Israel, but they're one of our main allies. Redoubled efforts to secure the release of hostages taken on 7th of October 2023, they were released. An urgent international effort to end the illegal occupation of Palestinian land. Again, that's not up to us to deal with. A durable political solution that ensures security and equal rights for Israelis and Palestinians. Again, why should we be wasting time and effort on that? We've got more important pressing issues at home. The reinstatement of funding for the UNRWA and support for South Africa's submission of International Court of Justice. Again, we've got more pressing issues at home. And then this is the one that really gets me, because obviously this is the one where he would really not survive. Because obviously you've got most world countries do not possess weapons of mass destruction and are safe as a result. I defy that. Because obviously elected Greens will push for the UK to sign the UN Treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. Complete stupid idea. And following this, immediately begin the process of dismantling our nuclear weapons, cancelling the Trident programme and removing all foreign nuclear weapons from UK soil. Stupid idea. Because obviously the minute you do that, you'll end up under attack from Russia. Because Russia know at the moment our Trident programme is the main thing keeping us safe, because you could flatten Russia within minutes doing it. But hey, we know they've got an idiot as leader. Work with international partners to enlarge membership of the TPNW and ensure that all states meet their commitments under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. And the Green Party recognises that NATO has an important role in ensuring the ability of its member states to respond to threats to security would work within the NATO achievement, and a greater focus on global peacekeeping, a commitment to the first use of nuclear weapons. But basically, he wants to then go and sit down and have a cup of tea with likes of China and Russia and go, oh, you're going to denuclearize. We know how that conversation is going to go. It's basically NO, do one, and he will come back in a bag. Because those countries ain't going to denuclearize. Because it just ain't going to happen. It's just mental. But you've got climate diplomacy and overseas aid. Again, this is where we need to cancel it. But in recognition of the importance of supporting countries in a global south to decarbonise their economies and build resilience to the increasingly severe storms, floods and extreme heat. This is what they would be pushing for. Increase the international aid of 1%. Again, where's that funding coming from? Increase climate finance for the global south to 1.5. So again, more money that we haven't got. So you're just pushing us to pay more money out to other countries we do not have. And then it goes on, and they would welcome contributions that migrants and refugees make to the British society. They do not make any contribution to this country. And this is what they would push for in this bit. So an end to hostile environment, which is only because we're fed up of them here. An end to the minimum income requirements for spouses of those holding work visas. But they shouldn't be coming if they're not working, they stay in their home country. Safe routes and sanctuary for those fleeing persecution, but they're not fleeing persecution. That is the problem. A lot of these are making up. Because when they come from Afghanistan, Albania, that is not persecution. It's all made up. The dysfunctional Home Office to be replaced with a new Department of Migration, separating the function from criminal justice, an end to the immigration detention for all migrants unless they are a danger to public safety, which they all are. Because the problem is, just look at what's going on in Leeds now. How's a migrant for 7 days? You have to go through more criminal checks, and they go through none. But they're more of a danger to you than you are to them. That's the stupid thing. So abolition of the no recourse to public funds condition that exacerbates social, economic and racial inequalities. Again, we should come first on this because we're British, not them. Those seeking asylum, which they're not, they're just coming here to get the freebies, which is what they don't understand, and protection to be permitted to work while their application is being decided. They don't want to work. They don't want to pay into our economy. They just want the freebies. And then this is where the whole stupid thing, then this is the last bit they put on there. The Green Party has been going from strength to strength. They haven't, because obviously part of their voting, their membership base is a fraud anyway, because to get the full policies you have to be a member. I've only been able to get this through being able to get behind the back door by using a bit of skullduggery. But when we tell the truth, aim high and to offer hope, voters respond. They've increased their number, yes, but it's not the full numbers if you minus out the media members that aren't going to vote for you. Councillors fivefold over the past 5 years. Yes, but then if you look at reforms numbers, they're far higher. Look at May, you're going to get trounced. And apart from the administration on 42, elected Green councillors use power given to them by their votes to build a fairer, greener community. No, it just wouldn't work. In this election, we are aiming high. Yeah, but you're going to get absolutely annihilated. And obviously, it's basically not voting for real hope. You're voting for vileness, and you're voting for racism if you're voting Green. That's what it should be saying. But that's their policies. Obviously, so it's if you do want to vote Green, vote for the Islamic Green Party. But if you want to vote for real hope, vote for real change, don't vote for that. Vote for Reform UK. For this May 7th, obviously, when we've got the referendum on Keir Starmer, we do have Reform in every seat that is up for change. We will be sitting in them. So that's the Green Party's solution. We know they're only not, all that will not be what they're talking to you on the doorstep. They'll be talking to you about Gaza. Most of that you'll never hear. But I just thought I'd fill you in and let you know what is their policies and what they'd be looking at if they came in. It's a disaster. But again, thanks for listening. It's a pleasure if you have joined me for the whole just over an hour. But thank you. Goodbye.